Welcome to the CHCI Leadership Conference breakout session. We're all connected: broadband, electrification, and digital infrastructure. We are grateful to our sponsors: Charter Communications, T-Mobile, and Edison Electric Institute. Our panel chair for today's session is Representative Tony Cardenas, representing California's 29th District. He sits on the House Committee on Energy and Commerce. Having served more than 20 years in public office, Representative Cardenas made history when he became the first Latino elected to represent the San Fernando Valley in the United States Congress. We will also hear welcoming remarks from Richard Ward, Senior Director of Government Relations at the Edison Electric Institute, EEI. The moderator for this panel is Alejandro Rourke, the Executive Director of the Hispanic Technology and Telecommunications Partnership, HTTP. He leads efforts to develop a Latino tech policy agenda that advocates for inclusive public policy that promotes civil rights protections, equitable access to broadband, and increased diversity in media and tech workforces. Please welcome opening remarks from Representative Tony Cardenas.
I'm Tony Cardenas. I'm proud to represent California's 29th Congressional District in the San Fernando Valley. First, I want to thank you for spending the week with us at the CHCI 2021 Leadership Conference, Presente, Latinos Leading the Way. Your involvement ensures you are taking the necessary steps to improve and empower our own communities across the country by learning more about the pressing issues challenging our Latino communities. Also, thank you to everyone from CHCI for organizing this conference and for inviting me here today and giving me the opportunity to provide opening remarks for the We're All Connected, Broadband, Electrification, and Digital Infrastructure panel, an issue I work on regularly as a member of the Committee on Energy and Commerce's Communications and Technology Subcommittee. Nearly 2 out of every 5 Latinos are still locked out of the opportunities created by new internet and telecommunications technologies. According to a Pew Research Center survey, only 65% of Hispanic adults report having a broadband connection at home, compared with 8 in 10 white adults. This gap has been exacerbated by the COVID-19 pandemic. What does this mean for our students, job seekers, and people trying to connect with their doctors online? The private sector stepped up to the challenge brought by the health crisis and made broadband more accessible during the pandemic. Their investment to help expand low-income broadband and their participation in the Emergency Broadband Benefit Program was an important step to ensure that every family, especially communities of color, can stay connected. We're optimistic that once passed, the new infrastructure bill will play a significant role in extending broadband to more Americans. $65 billion is directed toward broadband expansion, including permanently funding the Emergency Broadband Benefit, which provides a subsidy benefit for households. That was first enacted as part of the December COVID-19 relief package, and fully funding the Digital Equity Act to provide funding to states to connect the most vulnerable Americans to broadband. The infrastructure bill also addresses building out middle mile broadband infrastructure to bridge the last mile. Again, thank you for coming, and thank you to everyone on the panel for sharing your insight and your experiences with me and those here today at the CHCI Leadership Conference.
Hello. On behalf of the Edison Electric Institute and EEI's President, Tom Kuhn, thank you to the Congressional Hispanic Caucus Institute for inviting me to speak today. My name is Richard Ward. I am Senior Director of Government Relations. EEI represents investor-owned electric companies across the nation. We make up about 70% of the sector. And I'm here today to talk to you about how EEI's members can help close the digital divide. EEI members have a tremendous amount of fiber to operate the grid, and as they build out more, they're looking for creative ways to leverage their infrastructure and the excess fiber to help bring broadband to underserved and unserved communities. EEI members are not looking to deliver directly to the home, but think they can be helpful with respect to middle mile broadband deployment. They can bring fiber to a substation or an anchor institution in a community, and then partner on that last mile with a cable provider, internet service provider, or a cooperative. We think there's a large gap here that we can help close. These communities that are struggling include our customers too, and if we can help turn them around, we will see economic activity tick up and electricity use tick up. So that'll be good for power companies, as well as bringing much needed broadband services to these communities as they struggle to come out of the pandemic and look to explore opportunities that they would not be able to do without the proper internet services. We have been working across the Hill over the last year on infrastructure provisions to ensure electric companies are eligible and that we think through middle mile as an important component to closing the digital divide. I look forward to continuing this dialogue with you all in the coming weeks and months, and just thank you again for the opportunity to speak to you today. Take care.
Good afternoon. My name is Alejandro Rourke, and I am the Executive Director for Hispanic Technology and Telecommunications Partnership. HTTP is a CEO roundtable of national Latino civil rights organizations who work in partnership to promote access, adoption, and the full utilization of technology and telecommunications resources by the Latino community across the United States. Today, I am honored to help lead this important discussion and explore the important role that broadband plays in improving the health and economic well-being of the Hispanic community and its critical function in ensuring an equitable post-pandemic recovery. Thank you to CHCI for hosting this timely dialogue as a part of their annual leadership conference, and thank you to Congressman Cardenas for his leadership and for helping us lay the foundation for today's conversation. Before we begin, I want to invite anyone who is tuning in to join the conversation on Twitter using the hashtag CHCIHHM21, or by leaving us a comment or a question in the chat box. We will be checking both throughout our conversation and have set some time aside to answer any questions that you might have. Throughout the course of the global health crisis, COVID-19 exposed the depth of the digital divide and the important and essential role that broadband plays in sustaining critical aspects of our everyday lives. As COVID infections rose, so did the digital fault lines between those who have an at-home internet connection and those who do not. And as the Latino community faced some of the largest job losses, specifically Latino women, it became clear that the families that were able to withstand some of the harshest impacts of the pandemic were those that had a reliable broadband connection at home. Today, I'm joined by telecommunications experts who are all working to ensure that every household is connected to our 21st century digital economy, regardless of their race, their zip code, or their economic condition. Please join me in welcoming Laura Berrocal, Vice President of Policy and External Affairs at Charter Communications. Laura specializes in policy and communication strategy development for Charter, a broadband connectivity company and cable operator who serves more than 31 million customers in 41 states.
Thank
Laura,
you, Alejandro.
welcome.
Happy to be here. Thank you so much.
Anais Carmona, Director of Federal Legislative Affairs for T-Mobile. Anais is responsible for representing T-Mobile's federal legislative interests before members of Congress on issues related to telecommunications and technology. Welcome.
Thank you, Alejandro.
Marta Urquilla is the founding president of the Century Tech Foundation and brings over 25 years of experience leading solutions to strengthen the lives of low-income people and communities of color. She served in the administration of President Barack Obama as senior policy advisor in the White House Office of Social Innovation and Civic Participation. Marta, welcome.
Thank you, Alejandro. I'm so happy to be here.
And thank you all for sharing your perspective with us today. Anais, I would love to start with you. You've been working on these issues for a long time now, and as someone who works for one of the country's largest wireless carriers, I'm hoping that you might be able to help ground our conversation today and share why digital connectivity is so important for the Latino community, and maybe a little bit about how T-Mobile is working to expand digital opportunity across the country.
Thank you, Alejandro, and I'm really excited to be here. My name is Anais Carmona, and I'm a Director of Legislative Affairs at T-Mobile. I am actually Mexican-American and very proud to be from the El Paso Ciudad Juarez region. And so I'm just really thrilled to have this conversation. It truly goes without question that this pandemic has fundamentally changed and disproportionately affected the Latino community. And this includes our health workers, our students, our businesses, and our communities as a whole. And so T-Mobile is in a lot of ways creating next generation opportunities and using this technology as a catalyst for growth, but also for change and opportunity. And even before the pandemic, connectivity was the business that we were in, and we have understood that connectivity itself is the lifeblood of the Latino community. And as these digital demands continue to grow, we are even more mindful to ensure that no one is left behind. T-Mobile is one of the most diverse major wireless companies in the nation, and we're a recognized best employer for diversity and Latinos. And so I'm very proud to be doing some of the work that we're going to be discussing. An astounding 40% of Latino homes lack broadband access, and smartphones is sometimes the only connection to the internet that these families, these businesses, these students have. So as we move to the next generation of 5G, T-Mobile believes the benefit of this technology belongs to all of us, regardless of where you're located, where you go to school, or where you were born. Latinos have high levels of mobile device ownership, about 77% according to Pew, which means that we depend on mobile services for online access to do homework, to look up vaccination sites, but also to just do the things that we do every day to connect and stay connected. We believe that 5G will provide access to the speed and reliability necessary for Latinos to benefit from a wide range of connected technologies, including, remote education, which we've seen, telemedicine, and new economic opportunities, making us true players in the digital economy. So I'm proud to say that T-Mobile has been one of the staunchest advocates for universal connectivity, and we began our campaign to bridge the digital divide well before the pandemic-induced remote learning turned this nagging issue into a full-blown crisis. And so we're not stopping now. One of the things that you discussed and that we're talking about is investing in our network. So the recent merger with Sprint, we've promised our customers that we're going to have access to average 5G speeds. We're building this incredible network and want to make sure our customers are on it and are using it. And so we're promising to have up to 8 times faster than current LTE speeds in just a few years and 15 times faster over the next 5 years. So you can imagine what that'll do for unlocking Latino ingenuity and innovation and access to opportunities. So it's no secret that T-Mobile has grown our business with the focus on underserved communities. It's technically part of our DNA. We've grown our business and our customers very organically with the Latino and people of color communities. And so we believe in connectivity as a way to achieve a community's highest potential. And so we are really a company that talks the talk. We've pledged over $25 million for community initiatives that support in areas of, digital literacy, tech entrepreneurship, education, and workforce training. And so through our Equity and Action Plan, we're investing in policy-focused, minority-led organizations who know the community and who work the community to help invest in our communities and our businesses. The thing that I'm most proud of is our Project 10 Million, which officially launched in 2020 and now offers free internet service and free mobile hotspots to underconnected households with school-aged children, aiming to reach up to 10 million eligible households in the next 5 years. Now, I don't know if you can wrap your mind around what an impact and what a large number that is, but this program offers school districts as well free and highly subsidized data plans so that they can provide their students internet for free. And it's no secret, I think we're going to be talking about this a lot at a time where the growing need for internet access becomes more urgent. We are so happy to be those that are helping with connectivity to get access to the internet they need for their education. Our familias sit around and we always talk about how education is a great leveler. But in today's world, connectivity is truly required to have an equitable opportunity for all. Without that connection, without that accessibility and affordability, our communities will continue to remain stagnant and lose out on opportunities that could be very easily accessed through an affordable and equitable line to the internet. So we're strong believers that where you live or where you go to school shouldn't determine where you go in life, and your family's income shouldn't determine your outcome either. And we believe that partnerships like the one we've had with CHCI and civil rights organizations, including LULAC and Unidos US, who are in the communities, we are able to expand our diversity programs and better reach these communities as a whole. And one more thing that we've definitely done that is very exciting is that we've launched T-Mobile Home Internet, which is a new endeavor. We're delivering choice and competition all across the United States, but also in rural underserved areas. And I want to really touch on that point because we often forget that a lot of Latinos do live in rural areas. And so we have made sure that nearly 10 million of those households are eligible for T-Mobile Home Internet today, with plans to continue to expand access. And it's affordable, it's fast and unlimited, it's 5G powered, and you can set it yourself. So it's something that we're definitely excited. We're bringing the customer and the consumer competition where competition hasn't been before. And we have a wide range of other issues and other programs that are designed to help those who are, for instance, serving at the front line of the pandemic, called Connected Heroes, which is providing free connectivity to first responders, and a huge commitment to Puerto Rico, which I think is crucial for this group. While other wireless carriers have had little to no presence in Puerto Rico, T-Mobile is really truly doubling down and making significant multi-million-dollar investments in our network and our customer service on the island. And after Hurricane Maria, we built our network so it was ready for the next generation of connectivity, which means that our customers in Puerto Rico are ready for this next generation connectivity and access to high quality connectivity at a time when I think we needed it the most. So in a nutshell, I think 5G and connectivity brings huge assets to the Latino community. It gives us a chance to go into manufacturing and to be more efficient in our agriculture, develop apps that bring tourism to our communities, provide healthcare and telehealth for elderly people who can't go to who live in rural America and may need connectivity to go to a doctor's appointment, and definitely emergency response. So as you can see, there's a lot of partnerships and a lot of the things that we're doing, and I'm just extremely excited to work for T-Mobile and for our connectivity, not only before the pandemic and during it, but well after.
I really appreciate that. I mean, you said a lot, so I kind of want to just flag a couple of things for people. 5G, get into it. The new kind of at-home offering, we're all about it, right? And I think that for anybody that has household children or kids in school, please check out Project 10 Million. It's on the website. You can access it from your phone. A lot of great resources for Latino students. So thank you so much for that.
And as of this morning, we've connected about 3 million students. So we're really proud of that as well.
That is incredibly impressive, especially as we go into the new school year. So Laura, I'd love to kind of come to you next because, as you know, the Latino community faces unique barriers to both accessing and sustaining an at-home broadband solution that meets their family's needs and their family's budget. I know that Charter has been working diligently to meet the needs of our community, both in urban and rural settings. And I wonder if you wouldn't mind sharing with us, what are some of the values that define Charter's strategy? And I think that there's a new term that you guys are really kind of embracing, which is Charter as a connectivity company. And I think it would be great to kind of hear about how that philosophy is helping to inform the way that you guys make decisions and how you guys are helping communities get and stay connected.
Thank you, Alejandro. A few questions there, and looking forward to digging into that. But I did want to also thank Congressman Cardenas for his remarks and Edison Electric Institute for their presentation and perspective as well. CHCI, obviously, thank you. And Anais, great comments. Great to see T-Mobile doing so much work in Puerto Rico. That's my family's hometown, so that's really important. So appreciate your leadership there. And yes, home broadband connectivity is essential as well. And it's the technology gap that's most prevalent within the Latino community. And kind of piggybacking off of the comments we've heard here, living under the thumb of a pandemic for over a year and a half, this issue has really been pushed to the forefront. And might I add, with a much heavier focus than usual on the adoption and affordability side of the aisle, which is really great to see because I think it's a bit overdue, to be honest. And as kids go back to in-person learning, all three of my children included, which I almost need to shout a hallelujah for that. And workers are kind of making their way back into the office. It's really important that we maintain the progress that we've made on these key issues. And for us as a leading broadband provider, the issue of access and affordability are always going to be key priorities for Charter. We deliver TV, internet, voice, mobile services, all under our Spectrum brand to more than 31 million actually now customers in 41 states. So we are truly, Alejandro, to your point, a connectivity company. And over the last 5 years alone, we've invested nearly 40 billion, that's like billion with a B, in infrastructure and technology, including investments that will extend our broadband service and continuing to expand our network to reach those unserved communities is a huge priority for the company. In fact, I might have mentioned this before on some of the discussions I've had with CHCI, but in February of this year, we announced a $5 billion broadband expansion project that's delivering gigabit broadband, gig speeds to more than 1 million unserved customer locations within 24 states. Many of these areas are rural, and the private investment was offset by a little over 1 billion that was won through the Rural Digital Opportunity Fund. And for those unfamiliar with RDOF, as we call it, it's an initiative that was introduced by the FCC last year, and it's really intended to help fund the deployment of broadband networks to unserved areas. So all that said, I will say that we recognize as well that this build out comes with the added responsibility of addressing common barriers to adoption, and you've heard a few of them already, including the affordability of service, access to equipment such as laptops. That's so important, particularly for our students that were working remotely or studying remotely, I should say. They almost are like little workers when I saw them at home. And as well as digital skilling and readiness opportunities. All these things are super important. I think we can all agree that the infrastructure package that's currently being negotiated in Congress underscores all of these points, as does the numerous digital inclusion programs and initiatives that are being spearheaded by so many companies in partnership with thousands of national and local community organizations. You heard Anais speaks about some of the programs that T-Mobile has. Charter has several as well. And I would like to just take a quick opportunity to just share a new program that we just launched last week, actually. It's a $30 million digital inclusion initiative. It's called Spectrum Community Assist. And this program is actually a 5-year philanthropic effort, and it's revitalizing community centers in rural and urban areas across our entire 41 state footprint. And this initiative will invest in job training programs. It'll provide new technology and equipment to these community centers, gigabit high-speed internet. And also, which I really love, is that it's providing restorations and repairs to the actual buildings themselves. So it's kind of looking at a whole kit and caboodle here with making sure we're addressing all of the areas that are important for these critical kind of anchor institutions within these communities. So we just kicked off our event or the initiative last week, and that was in St. Louis. And we're making our way now to Charlotte, North Carolina, and Stamford, Connecticut, where we're headquartered. I work in Washington, D.C.'s office, though. My sister's in Connecticut. But additional events these events are going to be kind of slated for November of this year. But my point being that we're really excited to continue to grow our community impact efforts, be able to give back to our communities in such a big way. And I'm certainly looking forward to our conversation today. I think this is a great opportunity to share what we're doing. And I want to thank you for letting me talk a little bit about what Charter is doing and how we are kind of viewing ourselves as a connectivity company. So thank you for the question, Alejandro.
Of course, no, and thank you for that. So I would definitely kind of flag for people, so many of the people that are tuning in maybe work with local community serving organizations who oftentimes, don't have funding accessible to do kind of these capital expenditures to maintain the buildings, or to really kind of build up their staff capacity when it comes to digital literacy or workforce training programs, or have access to up-to-date technology, so that our community is learning on the tools that really are that the rest of us are using across the world. So thank you for that. So I'd love to shift over to Marta. So we tend to think about the digital divide and the public policy interventions needed to make universal access a reality, oftentimes separately or in silos. Sometimes we talk about availability, which is about infrastructure, really kind of like digging a trench, laying down fiber. Sometimes we talk about adoption, and then other times we talk about affordability. Century Tech Foundation really is working to mobilize the full potential of technology to improve the human condition. And it's through this kind of mindset shift, which you call digital advancement. So I'm hoping that you might be able to share how Century Tech Foundation is working to kind of redefine the way that we consider the digital divide, and how you are promoting approaches that leverage investments in technology access and adoption to build an inclusive digital economy.
Thank you, Alejandro, and thank you to my colleagues on the panel. You're very inspiring, and I'm looking forward to connecting with you more. And thanks, of course, to Representative Cardenas and to the Edison Electric Institute. I'm very happy to be here with you all. This is an issue that is so dear to me. On the question of the digital divide, this is my second time at this in the last 20 years. And that's a big part of the reason why I've come back to this work, because how is it that we're still here? 20 years ago, I joined an organization, a national nonprofit called One Economy Corporation, that was setting out to build connections for low-income communities, particularly in housing, to the power of the internet. Now, if you can just consider in the year 2000 and 2001, what that might have looked like when we didn't have the level of ubiquitous access of devices and cell phones and content even for our populations. I'm very proud of the work I did then. I built a national model called Digital Connectors, which trained and deployed low-income youth in their communities to help get their neighbors and families online. We built content for low-income communities to help them access resources. So fast forward 20 years, and I look at the world in light of the pandemic in early March, April of 2020, and could not believe how in the face of so much progress in the domain of technology, we hadn't made that same progress on the social front. As a Latina, I'm Salvadoreña, I'm, US immigrant. This is something that I care about because it hits very close to home, but I care about it largely for us as a society, as a country. When we look at the census data that was just released last month, and we look at the implications for the Latino population in the US, and then we look at the data points about what is and is not happening for Latinos in our country, it's like a fire under us right now, what we need to be doing to solve for this question of access in our communities, because it has huge implications. This is why we are talking about this problem in a term that we frame as digital advancement. We really want to shift the mindset on this digital divide, which I think has been a mental barrier for us in many ways. We then relegate the problem to something that can be solved by a simple connectivity to broadband and access to devices and tools, and then we're done. And that's just the ground floor. It's hugely important. It's very necessary, but that will not move the needle. That will not keep us from coming back here again in 20 years. What we need to understand is that technology, yes, it is essential. We talk about digital advancement as a civil right, and it is so key to the other strategies that we are trying to advance through policy in places, in cities, in communities. And we cannot talk about one without the other. So I appreciate you calling out the siloed nature of the conversations. And even within those conversations, if you are the leader or decision maker for a community, for a municipality, for a city, and you're having conversations about economic development that don't incorporate a role for technology, then we're not going to get to the solutions. We have people who are excluded from the digital economy. We cannot allow that to continue. So what we want to do is to build on and leverage those strengths and investments that are being made in digital inclusion, of which there are so many important and powerful ones now, and think about the future and how we are leveraging those tools and those strategies to be able to build sustainable futures for all.
I feel like I'm glad that there's a recording because I want to play that back to myself. It was so beautifully said. Thank you so much for that. And you know, as Congressman Cardenas mentioned, President Biden has really been working with Congress and the FCC to prioritize digital equity through the American Rescue Plan, the American Jobs Plan, and now through the bipartisan infrastructure package. You know, this infrastructure agreement makes it clear that President Biden is committed to addressing and redressing the uneven distribution of essential resources by taking critical steps to make our country's infrastructure and economy more fair, more equitable, and more just. And I wonder, you know, Anais, you spent a lot of time on the Hill and talking to Congress. What is something that what should we know about the infrastructure package, and how will those resources reach local communities?
Absolutely. And I think, first of all, it's incredibly commendable that the infrastructure package is bipartisan and has such an underlying notion of the needs of the American people, predominantly low-income consumers of technology and of connectivity as a whole. And I think that this is a significant and historic, unprecedented amount of funds that are going for broadband specifically in this infrastructure package. You're talking about $42.5 billion out of NTIA through the Department of Commerce that goes directly to states. And while that's still being, discussed and negotiated in Congress, it's incredibly important that the messaging is there. And especially, coming in during and out of this pandemic, the way that we are, connectivity has truly come at the forefront of a lot of people's minds, not only in a hypothetical sense, but in a very applicable way. And so, the Broadband Equity Access Deployment Program, which distributes these funds locally, is a true granular decision making on how these funds are going to be used. So there's a lot of language on unserved and underserved rural communities that also, have a predominantly and large Latino population. And I think we often don't talk about our rural Latinos enough because they're still facing these connectivity challenges as well. So this infrastructure package, I think, has become a lot more flexible, a lot more encompassing in terms of speeds. So that directly impacts equity. And what that means is these faster speeds, take longer on deployment of fiber, whereas low-income communities, as we mentioned, have cut the cord whether they live in urban or rural cities. And so these are both reasons why the sticking points are really crucial to getting that money where it's going to be used and where it's going to be utilized. And I think that's a key positive impact of this infrastructure package. I think, like as Laura mentioned, it tackles affordability, it tackles accessibility, and I think equity. This ongoing support for the low-income program of EBB. There was a top line for an increase in those funds and making some programs permanent to ensure that those low-income consumers are connected to broadband. So I think this definitely, the Success Act and making that permanent is going to benefit not only, low-income Latino communities, but communities, of color as a whole. And I think that's going to be truly a step in the right direction to equalize that access that we've been discussing, because without the phones, without the laptops, without the access, without the competition, I think our communities, this is a big step in which the government is investing in our broadband infrastructure.
Absolutely. And we know that the audience that tunes in, that's plugged into CHCI, are very engaged at the local and national level. And so, I think that it's important for us to all realize that, there is so much more, even above and beyond broadband, in this infrastructure package that we all should be supporting, having conversations about at the local level. Right now, there's a great opportunity to kind of engage Congress to say, this is important to the Latino community. We encourage you to pass this bill. So there's a lot of ways that we all have a role and a voice to play to ensure that these resources reach our local communities. So Laura, in the infrastructure package, there's clearly a focus on revitalizing America's digital infrastructure. The president believes that we can bring affordable, reliable, high-speed broadband to every American through historic investment, like Anais said, that's over $100 billion when you combine all those different buckets. So from your vantage point, how can local communities make the most of these resources so that we are connecting the most people as possible as soon as possible?
Yeah. Well, I think I wanted to go to Marta's point because I love how she kind of coined the digital advancement kind of phrase. When you talk about the digital divide, it sounds kind of negative. And I always say for underserved communities, disadvantaged communities, we've had lots of conversations about whether we should kind of refer to them as opportunity communities, because they're ripe for opportunity to be able to invest in them and create pathways for those individuals to be able to have more economic success. And so to meet the needs of these opportunity communities, collaboration among policymakers, the community itself, and the private sector is all a given. We all know that. And the entire exercise that we are seeing in getting infrastructure legislation passed in Congress, I think, is a real-time example of this. It's, as Anais mentioned, it's the result of enormous bipartisan effort and collaboration. It's almost slightly painful to watch, but but it's happening, and it will never be perfect, right? But the bill includes $65 billion in funding for broadband specifically, and we see it as hitting all of the key areas that will help improve access. It will help improve adoption for some of these underserved or opportunity communities. And there are several forward-leaning provisions included. Anais talked about the Emergency Broadband Benefit Program. Representative Cardenas did as well. That's it's been renamed as the the Affordable Connectivity Fund. So you have an extension there that's going to help relieve a lot of families from being able to not have to worry about paying for their broadband connectivity, whatever service they're looking for and interested in keeping. There's over $2 billion for digital skilling and programs, which it's so important right now to make sure that these resources are available to individuals. Oftentimes you have parents home helping their kids, and they're not even necessarily well briefed on how to use the computer or how to navigate the internet. So these local community programs and organizations that are driving some of these initiatives, it's critical. It's so important, and we have so much funding going into the states. It's, I think, over $42 billion at this point. A lot of that is going to go to deploying broadband networks in unserved areas, as well as those areas that lack access to reliable high-speed connections. That's an area where states need to be really careful about where they're using that funding, how they're utilizing that, and making sure that that money is being invested in the areas that are most beneficial to the communities that they serve. I would say we're definitely seeing good faith efforts to address the digital equity and inclusion priorities that we have in this country, and the pandemic has certainly, I think, helped to expedite the process and create a sense of urgency that wasn't necessarily here before COVID. And I always say that the pandemic has really magnified both the digital divide, but it's also magnified the digital opportunity. And I think that this bipartisan infrastructure package that's been reached in the Senate and hopefully slated to pass the House this month, we're hoping, is a strong example of kind of the digital opportunity that we have before us. And I think there are a lot of things there that will certainly benefit community, provided that everyone is doing their part in making sure that this money is being best used.
Yeah, 100%. And so, Marta, I wanted to come to you because There's a couple of questions, right? There's this huge influx of money in different buckets that are all available to our local communities. And I think that we all also have an important role to play as kind of local advocates to ensure that those resources are reaching our communities. So from your perspective, how can we all get involved, or what type of action can we take at the local and national level to ensure that our community is front and center at the table, helping to build and establish new solutions that address the unique barriers faced by our community?
Yeah, thank you. And absolutely. I mean, I just want to know, I think language is so key, which is, really does populate in our imaginations what's possible. And if we don't believe in the possibilities that connecting everyone can afford us, what are we chasing after, right? What are we working toward? So I'm glad that language resonates. At the table is so key here, Alejandro. That's what I had written down. Like, we have to be at all the tables. We have to be at the table of decision makers. We have to be at the table of ideas. We have to be at the table with other practitioners. We must not sit out this process, and understand that if there is something you don't know, or if it's intimidating you, you don't know how to begin to navigate, it's like a deluge of resources that are hitting, and some of it is tucked away. It's not very obvious for communities to know where they can source the resources within what's becoming available. Collaboration is so essential. We must partner. We must not think about this as just our own journey. It's our collective journey, and we will be stronger if we do it together. So I think that is first and foremost, is the alliances that must be built to be able to really leverage these investments and have them reach our communities. I think that, advocating not only for more in the way of resources, which folks have really been doing. And I want to give a shout out to NDIA, the National Digital Inclusion Alliance, which really has played a key role in this, in terms of this Digital Equity Act that's embedded in the infrastructure bill, right? To ensure that resources are there for planning and implementation for competitive grant programs that will reach those communities and those actors that are driving on digital inclusion. All the things that I kind of talked about, the possibilities, we can't get there without that foundation. It's very important. I think to continue to advocate for more on the part of the federal government. I know we're talking locally, but it's the local voice that matters, right? We simply don't have enough good data. Even just preparing for this panel, I'm sure all of us did the same Google searches and whatnot, right? The data just isn't as strong as we need it to be, or as robust to tell the true story of Latinos and their participation in the digital economy and what they do and don't have access to. And without that, that implicates the decision making, it implicates funding, it implicates programs. The emergency broadband benefit, for one, right? The idea of who's participating and what can we learn and understand about Latinos participating in that program, really getting to good demographic data will be helpful to all of us. I think really understanding that we have to be careful to not create another divide in households. So Laura alluded to this with talking about families, or it might have been Anais, I don't remember, but where we're making so many investments in K-12 because we became very focused on the homework gap over the last year and a half. Understandably, I'm a mother of 2 school-age kids myself. But then we run the risk of creating a divide within the home, because the adult care providers in the home are themselves not connected. And they are not getting those advantages, and those skills and those experiences are not being reinforced on a daily level because of the way kids do that with school, right? Their learning is accumulating. But for adults, it's not the same. So I would really strongly advocate for groups on the ground who are investing in the K-12, who are investing in young people and skills for tech, to really think about 2-gen approaches. Let's not leave the parents and the adult caregivers aside. Let's not triangulate our families. We need to move forward together. And that really means looking at what we're doing in the way of devices, and not forcing families that are low-income families to have to rely on sharing one device, which often might be a cell phone, right? Cell phones are great. They're ubiquitous, but they don't allow us to transact in all the ways that we have now become accustomed to transacting. Those business practices aren't going away. as we move through this pandemic, they're here to stay. So we want to help everyone be able to access those. And thinking about the tie to workforce, this is really a significant thing for our community. We have low rates of participation. Our digital skills numbers are really low. The jobs that are most available to folks that have a high school diploma and some or no degree are middle skill jobs. 82% of them require digital skills. That is the front door to entering into the employment sector. We need to ensure that all Latinos can open that door, walk through it, and keep going.
Yes. I feel like we could have this panel and it can be a 3-hour-long panel and we still wouldn't scratch the surface. There is so much that I think is being made available to us, and so much that I think that our community still has to kind of process and figure out how to kind of move the ball forward. And I think that right now we actually have quite a lot of engagement from friends and participants that have submitted questions. And Marta, you actually hit on one of them, which was they ask, a lot of broadband is focused on youth, but how can adult learners or low-income folks looking to change careers also access some of that infrastructure support? And I don't know if there's any more that you kind of want to add to that, or maybe how some of the resources that, President Biden is making available directly kind of can be used to develop new kind of workforce programs for, like you said, a very kind of multi-generational approach to digital skills. But happy to kind of pass the mic back over to you and see if you have some additional thoughts.
Yeah, no, absolutely. I mean, I think that, we really do need to challenge ourselves on our notion of productivity and who deserves investing in for their futures. And, we see that adults live longer lives. And we've seen that, just getting trained in one thing isn't enough in our world anymore, right? The degree is not enough, right? The jobs go away. We saw jobs evaporate in the economy, and we saw the need for people to be able to make these transitions like overnight from one sector to another. And the ones who were most able to pivot, right? To me, we all pivoted. But those who could pivot were the ones who had those capacities, they had those resources, they had the ability to pivot. We need to ensure that our communities are all finding themselves in a position to pivot as needed. And so to really prioritize adults, adult learners, adult working learners, to look at those partnerships that exist in regions and local communities between higher ed and employers and community-based organizations, and really come together to leverage what we have available to us, which are distribution channels. We've got real-time labor market data. We've got curricula for skills training, right? How do we build these pathways for folks to make them accessible? Language is a key issue right now. And to have tools that are available in Spanish, it's not an automatic. And there are national models of digital literacy skills curricula and assessment tools that are just now, because of the pandemic, being converted into Spanish. And we know, even within that there isn't just one Spanish that we speak. Our Spanish is very much local to our communities. So I think there is an investment that's needed from philanthropy and others to ensure that we can even provide the training grounds for folks to be able to pursue workforce development. But I think that understanding that adults are here, they have many more decades of working ahead of them, even if they're mid-age adults or adults in their early 50s, right? They still have a good 10 to 15 years before they may want to retire. And they need to be able to have agile skills to navigate this economy and this uncertain world that we live in. And let's not leave them aside.
100% agree there.
Yeah, and
I
Alejandro, if I could
I actually wanted to go to you, Laura, because I think that there are, one of the other questions that I think was submitted was, there are policies and incentives, but could you share some of the examples of, public-private partnerships that you believe have helped achieve kind of greater broadband penetration? I know that you guys work a lot and partner a lot on the ground, and that might, I think, hopefully be what you were trying to get at.
Yeah, no, and I think I think Malta's points are just right on. They're so important. I feel like the pandemic from the private sector side has really forced companies to rethink their community investment strategies and really think about where the gaps are and what needs to be done to kind of fill those program gaps. And in our case, we reevaluated programs and we decided to launch our Spectrum Community Assist Initiative, which makes sense now that things are opening up and we have, community centers being used again. But this is an initiative that's complementing several digital inclusion programs that we already have under our belt. And like one program, for example, that it's one of my favorite programs. It's called the Spectrum Digital Education Grant Program. And this program, we increased our funding last year during the pandemic. We're continuing the program now. It's our 4th year in. And this program kind of hits on Marta's points in the sense that we're working with local community groups, and it's making sure that these organizations that know their communities, that represent a diverse swath of backgrounds, whether it's organizations representing people with disabilities, organizations representing, workforce kind of programs, and making sure people have access to resources to be able to get the training that they need. Or it's just a local organization that's just focused on, just traditional digital skilling, learning how to use the computer, having access to equipment. But the point being that we're working with the local groups and the organizations, and we're saying, we value what you bring to the table within your community. We're going to fund it for you, but you go implement it, right? Because you know how to do it. Charter's not going to go and implement all these programs, but those stakeholders and influencers within the local community can, and they'll do it well. And that's how you make sure that programs are sustainable, that they have longevity to them, and that they are bringing impact to the community, a positive impact. And at the end of the day, it's really, making sure that we can come back and say, these are the metrics, these are the learnings, what's working well, what's not working well. That's the only way we're going to kind of be able to improve and move the needle and continue to kind of serve communities in the areas that they need it the most.
Yeah, and just sorry, Alejandra, just one thing to add on. Yeah, just one thing to add on to that. I think there's a lot of tranches and levels that we as, corporations and people in the community with the customers do that. And one of that is partnerships. For example, I believe it was a year ago, we launched a partnership with Engine 4 in Puerto Rico and the Virgin Islands, meant to bring together developers and startups and companies and academic institutions with government institutions to collaborate and be able to, be innovators, because we're not only, the poor Latino consumer just using their phone to make a phone call. Like, we are a community of bright thinkers, of investors, of people willing to use technology and look at the world in a different way and bring about these changes using technology. And I think that that's also something that T-Mobile and a lot of our partners are really taking a look at. We're looking at investment in these communities that bring social change through technology options and through technology challenges and opportunities. And so I think that's also great that we look at our talent and we look at our communities with a different set of eyes and with the respect that they're allocated as students, as innovators, and as contributors to the economy, which I think is something that, we often or is overlooked in our community, and I think is key for us to move forward.
Yes, thank you so much for adding that in. And I would flag to kind of everybody tuning in that all of these programs and thoughts and ideas that we all have about how to best serve our community, we're always lacking this one thing, and that was investment. That was dollars to bring these ideas to life, to accurately or be able to kind of either scale these interventions or build new programs. And the infrastructure package and the American Jobs Plan, and I think a lot of other bills that are actually being considered by Congress now are giving local communities these resources. And it's really up to us to encourage, I think, our local communities or even at the state level to ensure that they have a thoughtful process for how they are determining how these funds are spent. So when I think of critical infrastructure, I think about having state broadband officers, having a state broadband office that is charged with actually considering what resources are currently available in their communities, what the actual gaps are, what's the depth of the divide, and that are tasked with engaging historically executed communities as well as policymakers, as well as local community serving institutions to ensure that we are building new programs with new thinking that benefits everyone in the community so that everybody is kind of like a fully enfranchised digital citizen in our 21st century economy. So we have just about a few minutes left, and I want to kind of give us all an opportunity to kind of give some closing remarks. So if there's anything else that you guys would want to kind of share with our audience, especially through this critical moment right now where we're still considering when and how we're going to pass this infrastructure bill, maybe the last question is, what can we all do, right, to support this bill and ensure that our communities get the benefit of these resources? I don't know, Martha, do you want to kick us off?
Sure. So I think I'll speak for me personally and Century Tech Foundation is that we are going to continue to pursue our engagements on the ground and with partners to come up with ways in which we can leverage these investments to reach the underserved populations that we care about. There's a model called digital integrators that we're developing to advance through pilots that's focused on linking the digital skills to the workforce development. We believe strongly that those people who are the ones living with these challenges they are the ones most proximate to those challenges. They are also the ones most proximate to the solutions. And so co-designing and building those solutions together is what we are after. The second thing I would say is innovation, just to echo Anais, that, we can't get there without the innovative and bold thinking. And there's definitely been a lot of that we've seen in the pandemic. And we need to really push ourselves to view out beyond the horizon to what is possible and believe that those possibilities exist within us and within our communities.
Laura, any closing remarks?
Sure. We've covered so much. I feel like every time we close, it's like, I don't know. I really think we're looking at an all of above approach, and I really mean it when I say that, because when we're looking at the broadband challenges that we continue to face, this has been a long time that we've been dealing with these issues. We need to look at everything. We need to look at why are individuals not adopting, where are they located, how are we addressing the issues related to affordability, related to access, digital education, et cetera. And I do think we're making a lot of progress, and it is so important to continue working with policymakers to ensure that they understand what the challenges are for communities. And this includes kind of making sure that they realize what's at stake when you're seeing these dollars flowing into states and local communities, and helping them be very targeted and careful about how this federal funding is being used to support these priorities in the policymaking process. And then it's going to kind of pivot to the state and local areas and making sure that they kind of understand we need to be very careful about how we're leveraging this funding, because it is a historic package. There's a lot of money in it. There's a lot of benefit that can come from communities, but there needs to be a lot of transparency and accountability in terms of how these dollars are being spent, and ensuring that they are actually reaching communities in a way that's going to benefit them and help advance them economically in this kind of crazy, robust digital economy that we live in right now. Hopefully that helps.
That was perfect. Nice. Take us home.
Yeah, I think it goes without question that the world that we're living in, the world that our kids and our students and our businesses are operating in is no longer the same. And it's really heartbreaking that it took a pandemic to really bring this issue to the forefront of a lot of people's minds. But I think policymakers and diverse advocates and nonprofits and third-party organizations and community builders who are seeing the challenges are speaking up and making their needs heard. And I think that's what this infrastructure package is all about. I think it's a step in the right direction to bring us up to date and ensure that when this money, and hopefully it is allocated in such way, will really fill those gaps and make for a more equitable, more affordable broadband community that we have. And so at T-Mobile, we're just really excited to be part of the process, part of the conversations. And I would be remiss if I didn't say how incredible it is always to be on a panel with, two other Latinas in the space who bring such wealth of information and experience to issues that are really impacting our communities and low-income communities as a whole. And I think that's kind of the beauty of it. And thank you, Alejandro, for hosting us today, and CHCI for just having this important conversation.
Well, thank you all again. Thank you to Representative Cardenas and to our panelists for such a great conversation. Please make sure, I know that we threw a lot at you, but please make sure to follow them on Twitter and social media and stay connected. So until we see you guys next time, have a good one.